The single biggest way any of us can make an impact right now is by helping build world-class companies here from the country, whether as a founder, as an investor, as talent around the table. If we go all in on doing that, the rest will figure itself out.
On this week's episode, I'm thrilled to have Arati Sharma and Satish Kanwar from Good Future to discuss how one of Canada's most impactful couples is reshaping the family office and media world. Arati and Satish are big names in the Canadian tech scene, and today we're diving into their journey from their early days at Jet Cooper to their influential roles at Shopify, and now their work with Good Future, Backbone Angels, and BetaKit. We'll explore how their experiences shape their transition from tech executives to founders and investors, and discuss their innovative approaches to fostering diversity in venture capital, and learn about their recent acquisition of BetaKit. Plus, we'll get insights into how they balance work and personal life as a couple in tech, and their vision for the future of the Canadian tech ecosystem. This was such an engaging conversation about shaping tomorrow through innovation and inclusion in tech. Now let's jump into the tank for this week's episode with Arati and Satish. Thanks for joining us in the tank today, Arati and Satish.
Yeah, very nice to be here. Thanks for having us.
I think this is our first podcast together, Satish.
It's been a while.
Wow. Well, I'm super pumped to have you both here to discuss a wide range of topics because I know our listeners are going to be super excited to hear your views on. But obviously, a lot of people in the Canadian tech ecosystem know you both very well. But for some of our global listeners, it would be great if we can get a short background on you both, your early careers, how you ended up in technology and obviously together in your personal and professional careers. And maybe we'll kick things off with you, Arati.
I actually started working with Satish at a company called Jet Cooper. We were a small digital design studio in the heart of Toronto, back in the day when you could fit the tech community in one room. I started off as an operations manager, and I helped grow the agency until we were acquired by Shopify.
Absolutely. That was the very early time of the Canadian tech ecosystem. And how about you, Satish?
Yeah, I came out of U of T as a non-technical founder looking for ways to get closer to software and technology. And I actually joined Microsoft at first thinking that might be my best bet. And lo and behold, learned at that time that no global software company was building anything out of Canada. That kind of prompted me to go back to my self-taught designer roots. And from that emerged Jet Cooper that I co-founded with our friend Bert Ho. Jet Cooper was the sandbox for us of the intersection of design and software. And it came along at a time that was crucial for startups in SaaS being born here in Canada. And we scaled that over 5 years. Arati joined very, very early on. And together we all joined Shopify later on.
I know it makes us feel a little bit older when we say like Jet Cooper, the good old days and stuff, but it still was so vital to the Canadian tech ecosystem. And I think a lot of our younger listeners, especially the earlier founders today, don't really know how impactful Jet Cooper was. So without blowing it up too much, can you walk us through some of those early days at Jet Cooper, the talent that came out of it and the incredible company that you both helped grow, and obviously how the Shopify acquisition was transacted on? So Arati, can we start with you on that?
Yeah, I'll tell the story here. So I am also non-technical like Satish is. I was actually in Ottawa as a lobbyist as my first job. And I was itching to get into technology, into something creative, do something other than lobbying, even though I have a political science background. And I remember I was on Twitter and there was always this hubbub of what's happening in Toronto on Twitter. Again, the Twitter community was so small. And I would always see this name Jet Cooper. And so I ended up meeting Satish and Vern at a TEDx Toronto after party. And I was like, can you explain to me what Jet Cooper is? Because all I see on Twitter all the time is at the Jet Cooper office, going to Lean Coffee with Jet Cooper. And so I just want to say, even back in the day, being in Ottawa in a completely different bubble, Jet Cooper had this mystique around it.
I think one of the big things when we look back at that time is Jet Cooper was all in on cultivating community. And community was the center point of what was the emergent tech and social and kind of entrepreneurial ecosystem in Toronto. When it came to kind of the founding ethos and values of what we were building, because we thought of it as a sandbox, because we were so focused on SaaS and the success of startups in the community as our clients and as our passion, it just gave us this opportunity to surround ourselves constantly with that type of people. And that went from what Arati said, you could fit everyone in a room, to fit everyone in an intersection, to fit everyone in a block, to King West, to, and it kind of ballooned from there. That design slant that we had, it was very niche and it was very curated, as in that talent didn't exist in 2009. We trained it, we cultivated it, we brought it into the market, and that made us a magnet for more talent like it. So as these small U of T and Waterloo engineering grad founded companies going to YC for the first time, as they grew and needed design talent, they came to us. And this incredible thing happened 2010, 2011, 2012. They started getting funding from the US and other parts of Canada. And they said, well, we don't know how to scale design teams. We'll just keep building engineering. And hey, Jack Cooper, you keep building design for us. And that flywheel over 5 years grew us to a very specialized team of 25. And that's also kind of where Shopify entered stage left with shared interest.
I mean, the talent you had was unbelievable. You guys cornered the market. I remember with my first company, there was no product managers or design partners you can find. How did you do that?
I think it is around like the niche that Satish is speaking about, because that time was the start of mobile apps being incredibly important. We doubled down on being the people who can translate your product to a mobile screen to then translate it to the average person who was just picking up an iPhone. I remember when I was at Jack Cooper, I actually switched from BlackBerry to iPhone, and I thought I was like an early adopter at that point. So I can't imagine. Yeah, but I can't imagine, regular people trying to understand or trying to figure out how to use these mobile apps. And then on the flip side, these really smart young engineers trying to translate their idea to this completely new interface that we all had. So I think doubling down on that was important. I think the second thing was back to what Satish said about community. We would throw the parties, we would throw the events, we would throw the design meetups. I remember as a team, we would roll into, when Sheridan would do their grad night, we would walk around and meet those young designers. Hello, we want to see you. We want to meet you. We saw this kid posting on, what was it? Dribbble, right? We ended up hosting the first Dribbble meetup. So I think a lot of it was like that rep in the community, but also the camaraderie we had around each other. And then like Satish said, we had Vern, who was our co-founder with Jack Cooper, and he was this coveted designer. He would share on his blog all the time. And so I really think it is back to that community angle. We were the ones hosting these IRL events. We were the ones rolling together. And then we had this digital presence where Vern was sharing his insights around design and philosophy and showing his mock-ups and whatnot.
Yeah, it was a triple threat you guys had. I mean, it sounds like going from BlackBerry to iPhone was this huge leaping moment, but it was kind of like going from 2D to 3D, I'm sure, for a lot of people. But as you mentioned, Satish, like Shopify entered stage left, and a lot of people know how that ended up afterwards. But what actually happened? How did obviously the relationship with you and Toby and the team come about, and what made you want to make the transaction?
So, we encountered Shopify back in 2013, and they were a Series B stage, Ottawa located company, about 200-300 people, not the Shopify I think we all kind of know and associate with today. And so they approached Shopify as a client opportunity. We had really good relationships with certain other community members that were a part of Shopify from events and agency ecosystem. And they were looking at expanding the product suite into point of sale, payments, mobile, all of these things. Toronto happened to be a hotbed for design talent. And, Jack Cooper happened to be the hotbed within that. We had amazing conversations. We scoped out all this great work to do. And just at kind of the point of the dotted line, our main point of contact there said, but just one thing, Toby, our founder, he hates working with agencies. So you're going to have to meet him before we sign this. We're like, what are you talking about? We've been working this all out, making a plan. So Toby flies into Toronto. He takes a tour of the Jack Cooper office. At the time, one developer who's a Rails developer is like, that's Toby from the Rails community. And we sit down for a coffee, and it's going great. I'm like, we're going to close this amazing client deal. And about halfway through, he kind of interrupts and says, we really need to do this, but we have to do it as one team. How about you folks just join Shopify? And I was like, what? But ultimately, we flew to Ottawa the next week. And Vern and I encountered all these incredible humans. Harley, other members of the leadership team, original founders like Cody and Daniel, individual team members that Arati, Vern, and I had known through Twitter and the ecosystem. And I'm like, these are our people. Like, we want the same things. We work the same way. We value the same stuff. And ultimately, Toby saw a bigger vision for us than we saw for ourselves. And that opened the doors to the journey of building against that vision together. And from that shock moment in a coffee, 10 weeks later, we had merged in with Shopify. And that playbook Arati talked about, we ran that through Shopify Toronto for essentially the next 10 years, but especially in those first 3 to 5 through Shopify's IPO and growing Toronto into what is now the largest talent hub and densest place for Shopify as a company and as a community leader.
Now, what a poker face Toby had to obviously hold on to that before dropping it on you at the final seconds.
I don't know up to now if he just thought about it in that moment or came in with that plan. We'll have to ask.
We'll never know. But obviously, you both had unbelievably successful careers at Shopify. Arati, I got to ask, how did you manage the transition from being entrepreneurs and, solo operators to a Shopify, executive role, building out community and eventually director of product before leaving in 2021?
Like Satish said, Shopify felt like our people. I remember when I was telling my dad and explaining it to him, he was like, it feels like you're all just bugs in a rug. Like, it feels like you're just melding into the Shopify world. And it really did feel like that. I think at that time, and still to this day, Shopify is very much still a startup. And I remember when, Shopify started to grow and we used to hire all these like senior executives, it almost turned into a bad thing that Shopify was still a startup. But I look back at that and I think this is actually what made it so successful. So when I came in and Satish came in and others came in, it felt like you had your own little team, your own little startup, and you could go and make that idea a reality. So it felt very seamless, to be honest. Unlike other acquisitions, because they were in Ottawa and we were in Toronto, the small Toronto-based Shopify team actually moved into our office. So they moved into our office. They kind of joined our rituals. We created rituals together. So that transition was really seamless. I mean, we look back at it now, and I can't imagine going through another acquisition, to be honest, without it being like that. And then the role from community. I mean, my first job at Shopify was quite ambiguous. We had a CMO in Toronto, Craig Miller, and he had this idea of how do we make Shopify a really big thing in Toronto so people want to work here. And so my first job was community, kind of some very similar things that I was doing at Jet Cooper, but it was how do we throw events? How do we get people to know that you want to come work for this small e-commerce company? What is e-commerce? How is it going to blow up? And so that was kind of my first job. From there, I started doing a lot of events, and I realized even though we want to attract talent, what we're missing is a relationship with our customers, because we have this tech product, we have this amazing platform, but the people that use it are actually not tech savvy at all. They're small business owners. They're making physical product goods. That's what they're selling. They don't actually have that skill to be able to go and use a platform like Shopify, at least to like its maximum potential, unless you have lots of money or you have an agency or whatever. So my aha moment was, how do we connect with people in real life? So we started doing these tours, we started doing pop-ups, we started doing events, which eventually led to one of the teams within Shopify saying, hey, we need to do a product conference. Like, I really want to get the developer community together. How do we start talking about our product launches? I started this conference called Unite with me and a couple other folks. And our whole goal was, let's do product launches. Let's meet the developer community. We want to go do it at the same venue that Facebook does it in San Francisco. We're a real tech company now. And throughout that process, a lot of us realized we didn't actually have a product marketing team, because I kept going to the product teams being like, what are we launching? When are we launching it? We didn't really have a calendar. And so throughout that process, we realized actually we need a product marketing team. And so that's what I ended up starting and scaling up before I left.
It's amazing. I mean, hearing you launch all these initiatives within Shopify as it was growing so rapidly, it still makes sense that it's still a startup to this day. Things aren't always as perfect or planned out as, you would like them to be at such a large company. But it's so interesting to hear the evolution within Shopify as it was continuing to grow, and eventually with a director of product marketing role and the creation of Unite. I mean, you were on the product marketing side, Arati, but Satish, you were on the product development side, which was quite interesting, I'm sure. How did that change for you going from like the small, nimble team of Jet Cooper into this behemoth of what the Shopify ecosystem is today?
A through line to Arati's experience and mine is that Shopify was an incredible place for people with a high degree of perseverance and growth mindset. Both of us had very jungle gym-like careers going from initiative to initiative, problem to problem, really just using our trust battery and context about the business to unravel new things that needed to be developed in this hyper scaling period of the company. And the way Arati started in this community kind of new context, I started in this operations one, which was just like figure out what we're missing. And that put me into a position to experiment on the edges of our product. And it was in about 2014 that I began kind of working on some of our partnership opportunities with Facebook, which kind of culminated into the first way to process transactions on the Facebook news feed, where you could buy products from Shopify merchants. And essentially, I spent the next 7 years of my career at Shopify building out our multi-channel platform strategy. So from one Shopify, you could purchase, sell, and buy products across all channels, online, in point of sale and retail stores, on mobile, in marketplaces big and small. It wasn't what I thought I came to do. It wasn't like spelled out in a specific way. It was the thing that needed to be done to keep scaling this company at the pace that it deserved to be scaled. And I think that was, really what, for both of us and many others, when you look across the Shopify leadership table, why there's such high tenure and so many founder-minded people that work in the organization, because it kind of reinforces this founder mindset and growth mindset where people want to and continue to build in tours of duty and chapters over and over again, kind of large and interesting parts of the company.
Right. And for people who've studied Shopify, like a lot of Canadian entrepreneurs, there's this side hustle mentality, right? Where they want people to create, things with their hands, not just be working for Shopify at large. And obviously that culminated with you being, head of M&A and ventures, Satish. And obviously after the crazy, time you guys both survived during COVID, there was a moment you realized that you wanted to start something new. So Arati, I want to understand what that moment was like for you to eventually move on from Shopify and then become the founder and investor again that you wanted to be.
I think Shopify, because it is so high growth and there's still so many things to build out, you could stay at Shopify forever. It's obviously a really hard place to work. It's high growth. You end up doing a tour of duty, you're exhausted, you start again. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's what it takes to build a company like that. After my last tour of duty, I was pregnant and I took mat leave. That was probably the first time I had paused. And I know that's the story for a lot of women who have intense jobs like I did, where it's the first time you kind of take a break and you start thinking about yourself. And I remember when, the Jet Cooper acquisition happened, my goal was to stay at Shopify for 5 years, learn absolutely everything on Toby's dime, and leave and start my own agency again. I wanted to start an experiential agency. I fell in love with product. I fell in love with even more technology. I fell in love with our all of our customers who are unbelievable entrepreneurs themselves. And that mission was really close to me. So I think if I didn't go on mat leave and have a child, I would still be at Shopify. But that break taught me a lot. It taught me I wanted to be creative again. And I started to remember some of my own dreams. And I think, being around entrepreneurs like the ones that are on the Shopify platform, it's actually quite contagious. Like you talked about, that side hustle being embraced at Shopify. I bet you every Shopify employee throughout the years has had 5 or 6 Shopify stores and ideas of their own products they wanted to sell. And so that's kind of what called me, which was, how do I become creative again? I did go back to work after mat leave for a little bit. The company was going through a reorg, and I just decided it was time for my tour of duty to be over and for myself to bet on me. And some of the things that Satish and I cared really deeply about, which was, how do we now give back to the ecosystem again? When we were at Jet Cooper and when I was at Jet Cooper, I had an opportunity to meet so many different people that were building so many different things. And then heads down at Shopify, I was so focused on building Shopify and so focused on this very, D2C type of founder. And when I took that break and I took mat leave, I started to meet people again and people in the Toronto ecosystem who are building, completely different products. And I got excited about how can we invest back into that ecosystem. So that was kind of my aha moment.
I love how having a child gives you time to breathe, which is so.
Yeah, I know. It doesn't. Mat leave is not a vacation.
Yes.
It's not a break.
I just want to be clear for our listeners.
It's a completely different part of who you are, right? And I think having a child, there's so much discussion online right now about a child shouldn't change your whole life. And I'm like, well, maybe I was work obsessed and it did change my whole life.
And then in a good way, exactly. And as a father of two young kids, I totally get that. But you obviously did something with that free time that you had been between nap times and bedtimes. But you became the founder of Ghlee and became an investor by launching Backbone Angels. What is the ethos behind Backbone Angels, and what gap are you trying to fill in the venture capital ecosystem with your approach?
After we went public, and I think this is the scenario at most large tech companies where that first cohort that goes through a windfall like going public often does start to invest back into the ecosystem. That's usually, where angel investors are created. That's where folks have a lot of just insight into what's happening in the community and they start investing inherently. I found that the men at Shopify were the ones who were starting to do that, my husband included. He would say, I think I'm going to put money into this company. I got this deck. And I'm like, who's giving you this deck? Or I'm like, why would you put your own money into this? And so, Satish and I would invest here and there very passively. And I remember one year when I did get to take a break on mat leave, I started to look at our portfolio and our finances and get really more just involved in what are we doing, because both of us just spent all of our time at work. And I noticed our portfolio was not really just representative of one, Toronto founders, and two, the type of founders that we had access to. It was a lot of passive folks, our friends and others who would say, I'm building this thing. And that was kind of a hot moment to me where I said to Satish, this doesn't really resemble all of the folks that we probably have access to. We're both very senior BIPOC leaders at Shopify. Our portfolio doesn't really match that. And he said, yes, we don't have a strategy, Arati. And I was like, right. And he's like, if you want to go do this, you should go build out a strategy, figure out what our thesis is and how do we want to tackle it. And so that was that call to action for me, which I feel like I hadn't had that call to action in a long time. And so Satish and I were investing here and there, but we had this group at Shopify. It was some senior women and we would kind of hang out, vent to each other, sometimes debate with each other. And I remember talking to them about it and they were feeling the same way. They were, very senior women who weren't necessarily being asked to invest in companies, but they were being asked to mentor or sit on panels or come and talk about being a woman in tech. And we were like, well, we're mentoring these great founders, or we're getting to meet them, or we're learning about what they're building. But why is no one asking us to put money into them? We also made money. And people forget women were also on the table. So the 10 of us got together and created Backbone Angels. I was the first to leave Shopify. A handful of women are still there. And so I had some time. And as the marketer who loves to launch things, we decided to launch Backbone Angels on International Women's Day. And we thought no one would pay attention because it's a busy day. Lo and behold, unfortunately, it's still a thing that, investing in women and trying to find different diverse founders is still newsworthy. So we ended up launching Backbone Angels.
I love that story. I mean, yes, women make money too. And yes, women are successful at their jobs. Why not ask them for money, not just advice? I mean, that self-awareness that you had, Arati, is so important because you also thought about how bringing community out of it was also important. It always comes back to community, it sounds like, for you. And thank God you announced it on Women's Day, because when Bain Crypto announced their new crypto fund, it was all white men on International Women's Day. If you forgot that, that was one of the most bozo moves I ever saw. But, you and Satish obviously sat down, looked at your portfolio and said, this is not representative of what we want to be supporting as a family office. And in 2021, I believe you launched Good Future. So that has a mission of its own, more than just a traditional family office. So maybe, Satish, can you discuss Good Future's mission and sort of the type of opportunities that you're looking to partner with? Because it feels like it's got a Mark Zuckerberg, Priscilla Chan initiative to it.
That's very kind comparison, but
Yeah.
for Good Future is our take on the modern family office, and it really builds on the ethos of Arthi's work through Backbone and in shaping Good Future's mission, where both through angel investments, but now also through operating businesses and our foundation, we have more levers through which that we can support the communities that we care about. And it's really about reinforcing the ideas and people we believe are representative of our ecosystem and what we want to see more of in the world. And, we've kind of gone through this career story of people that took bets on us early at different points in time. And Good Future gives us a vehicle through which we can do the same. And I think, Arthi, you have this great kind of description of being, what is it? Family and friends?
Yeah, we're that family and friends network for people who don't have it.
Yeah, because there's so many, like the alpha we have here in Toronto is very incredible talent, but it doesn't come from the same multi-generational or institutional advantages as the Bain Capital picture slide that you're referring to. And so we have to impart with it different kinds of leaps of faith. We have to build access, and we have to give kind of knowledge and opportunities so we can cultivate and build that alpha in Canada. And that's not going to exist if you just keep, back to Arthi's story, those reactive opportunities. Those are going to come from the communities that already have knowledge and context of how to play that venture game. And so we just flip it the other way with Good Future.
Yeah, I think the other thing with Good Future is, Satish and I were investing. I'm doing Backbone Angels, and at Backbone Angels, we look at women and non-binary founders, right? That really is the crux of our thesis outside of industry or any stage. And so we were still investing in other types of founders as well. And so I wanted an umbrella for the work that Satish and I wanted to do together. The other thing that I thought was really interesting is when I started to look at family offices, there's a distinct difference between Canadian family offices and US family offices. So when I would go to conferences and events in the US, even if you go to like a summit or something, you would find the coolest people who run family offices or work for family offices. And it's like a coveted job, right? Your job is to figure out how to deploy this capital in really unique ways that go back to a mission. That mission sometimes has like a philanthropy lens to it. There's some sort of social good associated to it. And then obviously there's the more technical family office, how we're going to make money or give it back to like future generations. But the American pageantry is there and like the soul is there. And then when I would meet Canadian family office folks, we're just so quiet about money. Like I know that comes from the British. We suffer like from that too, from the Indian ecosystem because we're all, Commonwealth. But we're just so quiet. Like no one was sharing. No one even talks about working at a family office. It's so hush hush. It's almost like we're just going to protect what we're doing. Obviously, we're putting money into mining and other things and we're being strategic. But I just didn't feel like there was that loudness about it. And Satish and I, for better or worse, are often always talking about our mission or talking about, the founders that we want to support. And so for me, there was a little bit of how do we brand this? Like, how do we not call it the Satish and Arati family office or Kanwar Sharma family office? Like, how do we turn this into a little bit more of a mission rather than just a vehicle?
I love that call out so much. And I had the same feeling when I lived in the US working like in finance and with wealthy families versus the Canadian side. You're right. The Canadian side was always very hush hush, like don't tell them about this yacht and don't show them that we have like these 4 mansions. And the States, yes, they're a little bit boastful at times and maybe a little bit too loud, but there was a very clear mission that they were always happy to discuss and share with you about why they're doing what they're doing. And it wasn't just about creating wealth for the next generation, which is part of it, and investing in mutual funds and resources and mining, but also creating something that is bigger for the future than what they leave behind. And I think that is incredibly true about what you both are building. And I think founders should know that. I got to ask though, Satish, besides obviously the capital, you talked about community, Arthi, what other things can founders expect if they do work with someone like Good Future?
I think just a particular note on the capital, and you must see this all the time from the deals that you explore, is like a family office sits somewhere between an angel investor and an institutional fund. The metrics by which and timelines and expectations of liquidity through which a family office can make investment decisions is just very different. And that opens up this kind of spectrum of opportunity for founders where thinking about this as a very clear, addressable, and valuable category of potential investor, a type of capital allocator that can be especially important when maybe you don't know if this is going to be a venture scale company and you need different kinds of terms. Maybe you're in between types of rounds or sizes. Maybe you don't need to raise millions of dollars right now, but $10,000 angel checks are not going to cut it out. And we're in a different market and time now where like there's a beautiful array of scenarios, options, types of families, and types of structures through which you can raise capital. And I think it's just acknowledging that this is a different category of capital to go after. It can come into angel party rounds. It can be a part of institutional rounds, but there's a lot of times and places where it can be an important first step at figuring out the kind of company you're building, the kind of values and mission you can align with. And I think that's part of why, that brand Arati's referring to, describing that mission and be very clear that we have a Canadian family office predominantly focused on Canadian founders and enterprises that is focused on this mission. Like, we want and hope that inspires others in similar positions to us to go and to have that same rallying cry, because I think it just opens up the types and swath of businesses we can build out of Canada. So that's the capital part.
And I love that. I've been saying this for so long, so thank you for sharing it, but can go ahead.
And then, the rest is you get access to Arati's brilliant and beautiful mind. So that, I think that's like, access to kind of mentorship and talent is something that we really aspire to. We try to really focus on partnering with our portfolio companies through that early phase of kind of product market fit and testing and exploration. We try to be hyper connectors to other investors, other angels, and into the institutional brackets. Arati leans in on a ton of the topics that she described where I can be helpful of the things that I've got experience in. I try and do the same. And ultimately, through, again, community and people, we try and network our companies together so they can benefit each other. And I think those are some of the ways that we support. But ultimately, we can make decisions on kind of theses and timelines that are just different from other capital allocators. And I think that's probably the most distinct thing in our mission.
Your question was like, what can you expect from a family office like ours? I do think, we have to be honest that we're very early on in this and we're both still fairly young. And so that COVID break of, everyone becoming angel investors because that was the time to do it. And you could sit at home and meet so many founders at a time. I do think we're kind of post that era. When I think about Good Future, I see the portfolio in three lenses, right? One is, or pillars. One is the companies that we put checks into. For the most part, we will stay hands off unless you need us, right? So that is you message us, you ask us what you need, and we're there for you. But we're not the type of investors yet, at least as we're building our family office, who are asking you for even quarterly updates. I would love for someone to send me those, but we're not hounding you for those. I think that other pillar to me is what we're starting to explore, which is how do we support other types of businesses? So we are very cognizant that the creative industry in Toronto needs more support from families like us. And how do we figure out that beyond philanthropy, beyond the traditional mechanisms? So how do we support young talent? That's something that Satish and I are really passionate about. But I will say in the last year or so, Satish and I have been very focused on our third pillar, which is our own acquisitions. Ghlee with me and my brother and trying to build that out and turn that into almost like a different type of sandbox to figure out this whole D2C thing. That's where I've been spending most of my time. And so I'm sorry to founders who I've been really slow to respond to because I'm back into founder mode. And recently, Satish can talk about BetaKit, but that's been another thing where we've been looking at companies that we also want to bring into the Good Future fold that we know we can support from an operational standpoint. Because sometimes, those early angel checks, you can only do so much. And so I would say in the last year, that's kind of where we've been focused on, at least for me, I've been spending more of my time.
Well, thanks for teeing it up, Arati. I mean, this is where I want to spend some time, Satish, because I remember when Doug reached out to me last summer asking for some advice and where he should go with BetaKit. And sure enough, you two pop up as the ones who end up acquiring BetaKit. and take Good Future to the next level with your broader mission of community at the heart of it. So tell us, please, what inspired you to obviously acquire BetaKit, and how does this align with Good Future's mission?
There was a great kind of intersection of a few realizations in that time period. One, as Arati described, we were expanding on our kind of levers as a family office. I had just spent 3 years running M&A and other kinds of strategic transactions at Shopify. Coming out of Shopify, I was bringing that energy full-time into Good Future. We had just finished selling a hospitality business we had in the family office. And so there was a muscle there forming of, how can we execute more strategic transactions to support our mission in the family. Two, coming out of Shopify, Arati and I looked at the state of the Canadian ecosystem and felt like there was a broad sense of pessimism and fragmentation in Canadian tech. And that was really hurt in the soul of people, and especially this new generation, young talent Arati referring to. They felt like either nobody cared about what they were doing or nobody was working on anything interesting. And we all know that couldn't be further from the truth. But the feeling is enough for it to be real. And three, maybe a lesser known story is BetaKit, when it was founded under Postmedia over 12 years ago, was a Jack Cooper customer and a client. And so Jack Cooper worked on some of the early projects for the original founder, Sarah Prevette, and for Postmedia. And so we had a very long-term relationship and soft spot with the publication. We inevitably had that conversation. I touched base with Douglas. This all kind of really intersected at, we think storytelling and better vision can be a strong force multiplier for a stronger Canadian tech ecosystem, for more optimism. We have the capacity and tools now in our family office to do different kinds of strategic transactions. And we just love BetaKit. We go way back. A few short months later, Good Future and BetaKit teamed up, and it's been kind of an amazing ride. It's been less than a year so far, but I think there's a lot of incredible early fruit from the work that's happening there.
And Arati, I got to ask, when he came to the dinner table and said, I think we might have to buy BetaKit, what did you say?
Listen, I've done 2 media investments. Those are probably my favorite companies, not from a return standpoint, but I believe in media, and we have to figure out what the right model is. It just needs to exist. We need people to tell stories. Some sort of formula needs to exist. And when Satish said, should we get BetaKit? I was like, yes, mostly because I want Satish's brain on the other media investments as well. If anyone's going to figure out the model for media and how to operationalize it, it's going to be Satish Kanwar. And so for me, I was like, this is a no-brainer, but I would love to do more media, right? I think supporting media is incredibly important. And back to the mission of Good Future, you can't just make the thing. Someone needs to tell the story of the thing. That's how you inspire the next generation. And, the other thing that I'll say is back to, young people feeling a little bit, disenfranchised or not having those hubs of going to the Jack Cooper office for events after, long days of work. I felt like BetaKit was that thing that you go and check, right? BetaKit is that thing that you go and check and be like, wait, what's happening in the Canadian ecosystem? Who just raised? What are some of the challenges? Who are the new entrepreneurs that people are talking about? I would always go to BetaKit. And so I wanted young people to have that, especially with work from home now, right? You're not getting that same community and camaraderie. So when Satish brought it up, I was like, yes, but also he had just quit his job. So I think he really needed this. He couldn't just.
I couldn't agree more. There's no one better than you two to do it. Unbelievable. And you know what? Agree, from COVID times when people were just locked in their house using ZERP money to just, bet on crypto and not really having any connections to anything. This podcast came out of those COVID times where it was a side project, and then all of a sudden a community came out of it. The All In podcast had the same, little different trajectory, but it's okay. And, no, more and more. And I can see BetaKit having that same impact as well. And there's no one better than you two to take the mantle over from the team there. But I've already seen the changes. It's very evident there's changes that are coming down the pipe, but have already been implemented. Satish, what are some of the unique opportunities that you can at least share with us that aren't in stealth, that are going to hopefully, realize an incredible outcome for your community and obviously for your involvement.
I think that the foundational thing here is we've really fortified a long-term leadership team that reinforces, Douglas Soltis's position as editor-in-chief, continuing to tell the stories and be deeply embedded with the Canadian tech ecosystem. And now Syria Graup has joined as CEO, who has an incredible background both as a journalist and also through the tech ecosystem, building on that business model and the ecosystem development that's required to build a modern day media publication. And BetaKit has this incredible sector, this ecosystem focus that really allows us to not have to think about the broad consumer media challenges at play and just say, if we are serving the Canadian population, others with a vested interest in Canadian tech, with content and storytelling community about this sector, what is the right size business and a right combination of products we need to offer that does an incredible job at that? So it can be very well defined, very focused, and under strong leadership. And that's kind of the underlying approach that we've been able to take. Step one has been making sure BetaKit has the resources to provide real national coverage. And so we've been able to really grow the roster of both full-time reporters as well as contributing reporters coast to coast that contribute to the content and the velocity of all the amazing stories and people and fundraisers you see. We want BetaKit to still and always be that place that any founder can show their mom, my company is real, because we can't rely on US or global media to staff the resources here in our home market to do that. It's far too important. We have to take that ownership. Part two has really been improving the digital and reader experience. So the website, all the channels through which you experience BetaKit. We were the first addition to Apple News in Canada in many years, amongst other things. And then now what you see BetaKit developing, and I'll leave kind of upcoming things for that team to share as they're ready, but really these own audience channels and products. So incredible upgrades to the core newsletter, the BetaKit podcast, new events like the BetaKit Town Hall that happened recently in Toronto, and many BetaKit talks that have been happening. So just, in less than a year, just trying to build those foundations for what this, niche ecosystem model can do.
You got a 12-year-old startup basically back at day one. I mean, the town hall, the first one with Toby, it came out with a bang. And obviously, I think there's a lot of good leaders in the US market that you can look up to, like The Information or Axios and stuff. So this model can definitely be achieved here in Canada. And so I can't wait.
And maybe one underlying kind of value in what we've been building, and goes back to the Good Future mission, really, which is why, we believe we can uniquely do this with our involvement in BetaKit, is we want the journalism to be free. If we're going to make a difference to that young talent, feeling like there's amazing things happening and amazing interest in Canadian technology, and we also want to tell that story to the world, we can't put a $400 paywall in front of that. The reality is it just won't move the needle that way in terms of vision and optimism and stories. All of this happens around the constraint of how do we build this sustainable business through alternative business models from a paywall. I think you've seen in the larger media landscape a bit of a retreat from the paywall as a solution to all media problems. It's not. It's kind of almost a lazy solution to say, we'll just serve the people willing to pay. It has a time and a place, but it's not the solution for the mission of BetaKit.
All right, I'm so happy to hear you say that. It's like building a walled garden than rather one created naturally by your own organic benefit of delivering a service that people want and need. So it's great to hear you say that. I want to switch gears for a sec. Arati, you guys have a personal and professional relationship. I have to ask, how do you balance both of those with the family and all the initiatives you have going on? There must be a lot of things to talk about at the dinner table.
Yeah, I get this question a lot, especially from young women. My advice is often don't date someone you work with.
Case closed.
But don't do it. But I mean, the reality is we meet people in those, milestone eras of our life, right? You meet someone in high school, in university or college, you meet them at work. And so the reality is people aren't meeting people at work. And so what I say is you need to have your own boundaries and you need to set some ground rules. Satish and I's foundation is we started working together, but we also started working together not because, we were both at a bank or something. It's because we had really shared values. Like we wanted to build something from the ground up. We're project people. Like we can't stop creating projects, and everything in our life is a project, even our personal life, even our child, even, him going to a new kindergarten or anything. Everything has like a doc in a spreadsheet. And that's kind of our foundation, and we make it work, but we make it work because we had tough years of lots of arguments or realizing, okay, when we come home from work, we can't talk about work, or, hey, I'm listening to this story in the capacity as your partner, not your, coworker, or I need to just talk to you about something, but like it can't be about work. And so just being really real with each other, that's worked for us, but it's still challenging.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. Do you guys communicate on Slack or Teams? Or do you like book a Zoom call when you guys need to talk about like the
We're a Google family, so we're only doing Hangouts or Meets.
Well, you better believe there's a family drive, there's a family Slack.
Oh, yeah.
We have one too. My wife's a dentist, so she has to like just be so annoyed at me all the time with all the tech I brought home, but she's come around to it. I have to ask, Satish, becoming parents obviously influences a lot of your life decisions, but it also impacts your professional decisions and leadership styles. How did it impact yours, and then over to you, Arati, after?
I think like the most real thing that I experience is you get shit done in way less time. You become a parent, and that's when you truly realize how wasteful you were before that in terms of like productivity and a bit. So I think just knowing, hey, you've got a 20-minute window, the amount you can get done in those 20 minutes drastically increases after you have children. But in terms of as a leader, I think it just, there's no way of saying other than you grow as a person, you grow in your empathy as a leader. You have a better attachment of, heart and mind and understanding of people and their emotions and the things that might be affecting them outside the workplace that's coming into the workplace. It's overall just made me more holistic and empathetic leader. And I think that's so important.
Yeah, Satish is like very heart-centered when he leads people, and I've seen it, and I've actually learned a lot from him. So I would say the biggest change that I'm going to answer for you, actually.
Go for it.
When we had our kids, so Shopify and a lot of large tech companies, the great part is you get a great mat leave and a pat leave, right? And so Satish was one of the first leaders to take his full 4-month, right? 4-month pat leave.
Just under,
just under 4 months. And he took it at the beginning. And oftentimes, in typical relationships, the mother, when she goes back to work, that's usually, if you have any pat leave, you'll take it at that time to ease the transition. We were very fortunate. We both got to take that time together in that 4 months. And so I think that was a really good example for everyone, especially people who worked under you, Satish, to see somebody like you end up taking the 4 months and being in our little newborn bubble. I think that was a really big deal. And I like to use that example a lot. I, on the other hand, I'm not as like an empathetic leader as Satish. We have to win, get shit done. And so for me, having a kid was the biggest awakening, where I remember I went back to work and I apologized to some of my team members because I was like, why was I booking like a team event at 7 p.m.? I was like, some of you have children. Why didn't you say anything? I need to be in bed by like 8. Like that's like prime bath bedtime. And so for me, I think it was a little bit more of a shock.
Your schedules all become upside down. You start apologizing.
Yeah. I was like, why did you agree to come to the team dinner? Like, why would you do that?
That's so great to hear. I mean, a lot of, entrepreneurs are parents, and they need to hear these things from some of the leaders in our community, from people like you. So I really appreciate you sharing those. I just want to switch gears before we wrap things up. Obviously the Canadian tech ecosystem is going through a lot climate changes, and you guys are at the epicenter on reporting a lot of it through BetaKit and your other initiatives. I got to ask, Satish, first with you, what kind of trends are you observing in the Canadian tech ecosystem, whether good or bad? And, what do you think our listeners should be aware of?
The biggest risk to the future promise of Canada right now is our innovation agenda. Like, our future economic prosperity is not predicated on the things in our ground or the things we can bring in from other parts of the world. It's predicated on our ability to be global leaders in what we export, what we create, the IP we have, the way we leverage our talent, and how we hone our capital and intellectual resources into incredible kind of solutions and technologies. And we're just in an era where there isn't enough kind of shared emphasis and understanding of like how much we're gambling with the key ingredients that make that stuff possible. Those ingredients they're not just the tangible ones of like, yes, there's talent and talent risk of retention risk, but it's really just belief and optimism and people's encouragement that they should go start companies and they should take risks and that people will support them, and that there's people are excited when people win and succeed at these things. The trends that I'm seeing kind of stem from a lot of the tangible behaviors that we're seeing of people worried about the tax increases, thinking about moving to the US, wondering about kind of if building AI in Canada has regulatory risk, all these things, they all stem from like, no one's sure if there's enough shared vision and trust to go do these things. There's never going to be 100% answers. It's about the environment, about the climate, about the feeling.
But uncertainty is the confusion and the kills innovation is what it sounds like you're saying as well.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And so like this is probably the most critical time in my career that I've seen for kind of community confidence and way forward. There's parts of what we're doing that I hope will help it. But ultimately, the single biggest way any of us can make an impact right now is by helping build world-class companies here from the country, whether as a founder, as an investor, as talent around the table. If we go all in on doing that, the rest will figure itself out.
Yeah, passing it to you, Arati, on community, what role does the Canadian tech community play in bringing the global attention back to Canada for the next decade?
Yeah, your initial question was around trends, and I gotta say there's this lovely new trend of people actually meeting up with each other. It stems from these young kids just graduating university, trying to figure out where to go, where are their community hubs, how can they continue that innovation cycle that they were in, pitching, making things, showing it to their friends, showing it to their community, getting feedback. I have to shout out the new demos team. I think what they're doing at that grassroots level and getting folks from the East End and, Waterloo and all that, it kind of reminds me of those like early Jet Cooper days that we talked about, like actual people building things, sharing it with others, trying to get users. I don't know if it's a trend, but I do think that is what's probably needed post-COVID. Satish, around your like innovation agenda, I'm a little bit worried even after the whole taxation relief and all of those debates, that there are going to be people who are not close to the grassroots who are going to try to figure out what the solution is and put funds towards the innovation agenda. And I don't know if that's the way to go. If anything, I remember the debates around like, should we leave Canada? Should we not? Oh my God, we're all going to exit. The one thing that people kept talking about was like, well, we have healthcare here. Like that was like the one value add of Canada. My stance on this is if policymakers or government or anyone actually want to do something for the innovation agenda is they have to make it easier and more affordable to live here, especially for young people. And if they can't do that, like, please don't create another shitty grant system for entrepreneurs or some sort of bad like AI credit. Like, please don't do that. Like, just make it easier for young founders to start businesses here and to make it affordable. Like that's what we need.
Yeah, we can't pay our way out of this, and we can't put up, these barriers to make it even harder to just get through every day while also trying to build the next Shopify, which everyone is trying to do. And it just becomes harder and harder. Like, could the next Shopify be built, in this decade versus the last decade? I don't know. It seems like it's a lot harder in Canada versus maybe somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm in such a D2C bubble, right? And so with a lot of the types of companies I work with, there is still that draw. We should move to LA. We have to move to New York. There's that ecosystem there. And so from my lens in the entrepreneurship communities I'm in, I do think we can build those out of Canada. Those founders just need more relief. Like it just needs to be more affordable to live here.
And I think that's the existential question. So
we'll save that for another podcast. But the last question I want to ask you both, first to you, Satish, what legacy do you hope to leave on the Canadian tech scene after all the initiatives you have going on?
I hope people look back and see the work we did and who we are as force multipliers for this mission. That, when times are good and when times are tough, there was good people that were fighting the good fight for that long-term prosperity of Canadian tech. And that's what I want to be all about.
I hope that we can leave a legacy of connecting. I think that there's a lot of different subgroups, ecosystems. We talked about those old family offices. I hope we can be the ones that are connecting these different communities. That's what I'd like to do.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'm so excited to have, a back seat to watching all the things that you guys are doing and a front seat through the Beta Kit eyes. So I appreciate that. Before we wrap things up, we always ask our guests for their fast favorites. So first off, with you, Arati, favorite podcast?
I'm an armchairy, so I'm back to armchair expert. I took a year break and then I'm back in. I'm really happy. It's one of my favorites. And second in that is the Dream Bigger podcast by Sif. She's actually in our portfolio company. She owns a company called Array and she has a podcast called the Dream Bigger. And I love to listen to it to get tips on how to be better.
Cool. You, Satish?
Amazing. Oh, podcast? I listen to the Acquired podcast a lot, typical, but I'm on hour 8 of the Microsoft episodes right now.
Oh,
and just
man.
Loving it.
That's so good. I still think Costco is my favorite one. Those guys are fantastic.
Oh, I like the Hermes one.
Hermes was fantastic. LVMH too.
I like the LVMH one too.
Yeah, the LVMH one is really good.
So amazing. All right, next to you, Satish. Favorite newsletter or blog?
Beta Kit. Easy.
Okay. Same thing where you, Arati?
My answer was Beta Kit too.
Easy.
Fine. Easy. All right. Favorite tech gadget, Arati?
Tech gadget? I'm an Oura Ring gal.
Ooh. Okay. And let me guess. Satish's Whoop.
Yeah, I was once upon a time. I really like I'm Apple Watch now, but the Withings Body Smart scale is incredible for
You talk about that all the time.
I've had every version for over, I think, 8 or 10 years now. And it's
what do you love about it?
It's the simplest solution to the step on something every day and get useful body metrics. And it's a habit, and it all Apple Health with your Apple Watch. It's daily, trusty, all the time.
Very cool. Okay, Satish, favorite new trend?
Oh, I talked about this at the town hall, rejection therapy. I love that new kids are figuring out about rejection therapy, self-help challenges. Every founder, you're a young founder, you got to figure out, every VC in Canada needs to say no to you first. That's just that's what happens. And you got to go through that. And then you're ready to come back to the table.
We tell our companies the same thing. Go practice 25 pitches on the ones you don't want to raise money from. And then you're ready for the good ones. How about you, RD?
I think it has to do with my hat, which is my new trend is companies actually making money. Yeah. Can companies make money now that we're post-COVID investing in everyone? I'm okay, let's start.
You show up to pitches wearing a EBITDA hat. I love it.
I just got it. I'm really happy about it.
Do you get it from a Shopify store?
I did, obviously.
Obviously. Okay, Arati, favorite book?
Favorite book? Oh, this is so typical. My favorite book is any Jane Austen, but especially Pride and Prejudice. It's one book I'll always reread.
Fair enough. You, Satish?
A Toby recommendation earlier in my career, Courage to be Disliked. Arati knew this was going to be the answer.
Is that mandated across the Shopify verse or no?
It was on
in the library.
In the library, in the book bar. But it really
okay.
I'm a big fan. I
Satish tells everyone to read this book.
It sets you free. You're just I'm in control of my own destiny.
I appreciate the consistency. And last but not least, Satish, your favorite life lesson?
Embrace naivety. So much of what we shared, we have no business, no experience, no history or track record or resume that suggests we should be doing those things. They come from a point of what we find interesting and going in with kind of wide eyes, not with like, this is the right way to do investing or family office or media or any of these things, but just being willing to be naive and hoping that leads to creative outcomes. So I used to really build a lot of mental walls of like, I'm not a product person. I'm not a VC. I'm not and nobody knows what they're doing. So just get out there and do it.
Coming from you, that means a lot. For you, Arati?
Mine is from my dad, which is better late than never. And I think I'm turning 39 in 2 months. And so it's one that's on my mind, which is you can still do anything you want. There's no point to regrets. You don't want to be at that end of life whenever it comes thinking about all the things you didn't do because you thought it was too late. So better late than never.
I love that. I just turned 40 and I'm still considered the baby in the family. So it's better late than never for sure. Thanks so much for joining us in the tank today with Arati Sharma and Satish Kanwar from Good Future.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tank Talks. We hope you found today's conversation as insightful as we did. If you're enjoying the show, we've got 3 quick things to ask of you. First, hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or YouTube. Next, follow us and stay up to date on upcoming episodes and behind-the-scenes content on social media with Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And lastly, share the love. If you found value in today's episode, share with a friend or colleague who'd benefit too. Your support helps us bring in more amazing guests and keeps the Tank Talks engine running. That's it for today. Until next time, keep disrupting and innovating.